What if the moment you think you are about to die is the moment someone appears out of the storm to change your whole life? The world around Eleanor Ashford had turned into a white, endless emptiness. The sky was white. The ground was white. Even the wind felt white as it screamed through the overturned wagon and tore at the thin coat wrapped around her shaking body. She had stopped feeling the cold an hour ago, and she knew that was dangerous. Cold that deep did not hurt. It tricked you. It made you think you could rest. It made you think you could sleep. It made you think you were safe. Her fingers were stiff sticks inside her worn coat. Her feet felt like stones. Kansas was far behind her now, only a memory of rooms too small and voices too loud. She had run from one kind of cage straight into another. She tried to push against the wagon again, her shoulder aching as she tried to make more space from the wind, but the storm filled every crack with snow. She finally gave up and sank against the wheel, her breath a weak puff in the freezing air. Maybe this was it. Maybe the wide, wild land of Wyoming would swallow her whole. Maybe dying in the snow was easier than facing the life she had escaped. Her eyes slipped closed. Then she heard it. Thump, thump, thump. A steady sound. Heavy. Too solid to be her heartbeat. She forced her eyes open. At first she saw nothing but swirling white. Then a dark shape formed inside the storm. It grew larger and larger. A horse. A huge black horse, pushing through the blizzard with slow, powerful steps. Steam burst from its nostrils like smoke from a train. On its back was a man. A giant of a man wrapped in oilskin and furs, his hat pulled low, his shoulders wide enough to block half the storm. His face was a shadow under the brim, his beard thick and covered in ice. He seemed carved from the same stone as the mountains hidden behind the storm. Eleanor's heart stumbled with fear. A man out here. Men were the reason she had fled Kansas. Men were the reason she was freezing to death now. Men had been danger her whole life. The horse stopped just a few feet from her. It stood still as a statue, waiting. The man did not speak. He only watched her for a long moment, his breath slow and steady while hers came fast and weak. Then he swung down from the saddle. He moved with quiet control. No wasted motion. No rush. His boots crunched in the snow as he came closer. Snowflakes clung to his beard, to his coat, to his lashes. He knelt beside her, and she flinched, expecting a rough hand, a harsh command. Instead, he only looked at the broken wagon, then at her. His eyes, now visible beneath the hat, were a clear gray. Calm, sharp, like a winter sky after a storm. Not full of pity, not full of judgment, only steady thought. He touched the cracked wagon wheel, his gloved hand huge beside her small one. "This will not last the night," he said. His voice was rough, deep, and quiet. It sounded like boulders rolling somewhere far off. But there was no unkindness in it, only truth. Eleanor stared at him, unable to speak. She nodded. He stood, tall as a mountain, and said one simple word, "Come." It was not a command. It was not a threat. It was an invitation to survive. He turned toward his horse, expecting her to follow. She tried to stand. Her legs gave out instantly. She collapsed into the snow, a wave of shame and weakness crashing over her. Before she could even gasp, he was there again. He bent, slid one arm under her knees and one behind her back, and lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all. Her whole body went stiff. Her mind screamed with old memories, old hands, old fear. She squeezed her eyes shut. But his hold was steady, impersonal, practical. He carried her to the horse, lifted her with careful strength, and settled her in front of the saddle. Her back pressed against his chest as he mounted behind her. His warmth hit her like a shock, a burst of life in a frozen world. He pulled his heavy cloak around her, sealing her inside it with him. "Hold on," he said, his voice close to her ear. The horse began to move, slow, strong, each step pushing them deeper into the storm. Time disappeared. The world was only snow, wind, and the deep warmth at her back. His body shielded her from the storm like a wall. She leaned against him, too tired to fight, too cold to care. For the first time in years, she felt a hint of something she had almost forgotten: safety. She drifted in and out, her head resting against his shoulder. Then the horse stopped. The wind softened here. She opened her eyes and saw a rock wall rising high into the storm. A lean-to shelter stood against it, a simple frame covered by heavy canvas. Firewood sat piled under another tarp. He dismounted and lifted her down again. She could barely stand. He guided her inside the shelter and placed her on pine boughs covered with a buffalo robe. The scent of pine filled her lungs. Without a word, he stepped back into the storm. Through the opening, she watched him care for his horse with gentle, experienced hands. Only after the animal was safe did he begin to build a fire. He worked calmly, arranging kindling, striking flint, coaxing a small flame into life. When it grew into warm, crackling fire, he melted snow in a pot. He poured the warm water into a tin cup and held it out to her. "Drink!" Her hands shook too badly. He noticed. He knelt in front of her and held the cup to her lips. She drank. The warmth spread through her like a slow, painful thaw. He gave her dried meat next. She ate. The world steadied. The fire glowed, filling the small shelter with light and heat. The storm howled outside, but inside there was calm. He had not asked her name. Not one question. He simply gave her silence. A silence that felt like respect, not distance. As night fell and the cold deepened, he spread out his thick bedroll. It was large enough for two. The cold pressed in harder. Her thin dress was still damp. She was shivering again. "We will need to share the warmth," he said, "or one of us will freeze before morning." Fear twisted inside her. To lie beside a man, to be that close, to trust. He held up a hand. "You have my word," he said. "No harm will come to you." He turned away and lay down first, leaving space for her, leaving the choice to her. The cold was sharp as knives. Her body shook. She watched him. He did not move. He did not look at her. Slowly, she crawled onto the bedroll. She kept as far as she could. The cold bit deeper. Finally, trembling, she shifted an inch closer. Her back brushed his shirt. Warmth rushed through her like fire. For the first time since she fled Kansas, she closed her eyes without fear. She slept. Eleanor woke to a soft gray light inside the shelter. For a moment she did not know where she was. The cold was gone. Her body was warm, her breath steady, and the heavy wool blanket covered her shoulders. Then she felt the slow rise and fall of the man's breathing beside her. She remembered the storm, the fire, the warmth, him. He was already awake. He crouched near the fire pit, where a small flame burned steady and clean. He poured dark coffee from a dented pot into a single tin cup. When he looked over at her, his gray eyes were calm and steady. She pushed herself up, her muscles stiff. He walked over and handed her the cup without a word. The steam hit her face. The smell was strong and rich. The first sip was bitter, but it warmed her throat and chest. It felt like life itself. "I never thanked you," she said. He only nodded. He was not a man who needed thanks. She asked his name. "Wyatt," he said. Just that, solid and simple. When she asked who he was, he gave an answer that struck something deep inside her. Someone who does not leave people in a storm. It was not pride. It was not a story. It was a rule he lived by. She held the cup tighter, taking in the truth of it. After they ate the last piece of dried meat, Wyatt began breaking down the shelter. His movements were fast and sure. He folded the canvas, tied the bundles, and saddled the black horse with the same quiet skill he had shown last night. When he finished, he turned to her. "We go to Elk Hollow. You can find lodging there." He boosted her into the saddle, then took the reins and began to walk. The sun rose higher, turning the snow-covered world into a blinding sea of white. They traveled for hours until a thin line of smoke appeared in the distance. Then a cluster of cabins. A church. A blacksmith shop. A small mercantile. Elk Hollow. As they entered, people stopped what they were doing. A man paused with an axe in midair. Women froze on porches. Curtains lifted. Everyone stared. They saw a strange woman with torn clothes riding a massive black horse led by a silent giant. Eleanor could feel their judgment burn across her skin. But Wyatt did not react. He walked straight ahead, steady as ever, until they reached a 2-story boarding house. The sign read, "Rooms for let, Widow Jensen." Wyatt helped Eleanor down but did not follow her up the steps. He stood beside the horse, like a stone guardian. Widow Jensen opened the door before Eleanor could knock. Her eyes were sharp, her mouth tight. She looked Eleanor up and down, then glanced at Wyatt with suspicion. "I need a room," Eleanor said. "I can pay." "You alone?" the widow asked. "Yes." "Then $2 a week, meals included." Paid in advance. Eleanor handed over her last coins. The widow nodded and stepped aside. Eleanor turned back. Wyatt watched her with that same unreadable calm. She wanted to say something, anything, but nothing felt enough. She gave him a small nod, the best thanks she could manage. He touched his hat in a quiet farewell, mounted his horse, and rode out of town without looking back. That night, Eleanor lay awake in her small room. The wind outside was gentle now. The house creaked. Every sound felt sharp in the stillness. She had a room, a roof, a bed, but she also felt a strange emptiness she could not name. Was he still close? Had he left? She did not know. The next morning, she searched for work. The only place needing help was Silas Croft's tannery on the edge of town. The smell hit her before she reached it. When she approached, Silas barely looked at her until she mentioned she could sew leather. "Show me," he said. She stitched a line in thick hide, her hands remembering the skill her father taught her. When she handed it back, Silas tested it, trying to pull it apart. The seam did not move. "Sunup," he said. It was the closest thing to approval he gave. Days turned into weeks. Eleanor worked hard. Her hands grew tough. Her stitches became stronger. The town slowly accepted her. Women came with torn dresses. Men brought saddles and chaps. They stopped whispering and started nodding. But every evening, when the tannery closed, she felt a pull toward the edge of the woods. One night, she followed it. She found a small fire in a clearing. Wyatt sat by it, sharpening a knife, the flames lighting his steady eyes. He did not act surprised to see her. "Sit," he said. She sat. He poured her coffee. They spoke little, yet the silence between them was warm. She felt safe in a way she had not felt in years. She returned the next night, and the next. Each time he offered warmth and quiet company. Each night they lay back to back on the same bedroll, sharing warmth the way they had in the storm. Nothing more. Never more. Not until she asked. And then one evening she did ask. She asked why he had never touched her first. He stared into the fire a long time before answering. "Because you have not said I could." The words hit her like a spark. She felt something inside her melt away. She moved to sit beside him, her shoulder brushing his. His hand slowly lifted and rested gently on her arm, waiting for her to decide. She leaned into him. From that night on, she sat beside him in the firelight. He opened up in small ways. She found herself smiling more, breathing easier, feeling stronger. Until one day, everything changed. A rider entered Elk Hollow. A man she knew. A man from Kansas. A man who believed she belonged to him. Alistair Finch. And he had come to take her back. The moment Alistair Finch rode into Elk Hollow, Eleanor felt the world tilt. The sound of his horse's tired hooves echoed through the street like a warning. Even before she saw his face, her heart knew. Fear rose cold and sharp inside her. But something else rose with it, something steadier and stronger. Wyatt. Silas Croft paused mid-swing with his scraper and looked at her. Eleanor's fingers froze over the leather she was stitching. Her breath came thin and shaky. She whispered, "He is my past." Outside, the town fell into a strange silence as Alistair walked out of the mercantile holding a folded paper. He stood tall and proper in his fine city coat, looking out of place in the dusty street. His eyes scanned the town like a man searching for something that belonged to him. Then his gaze found her. He smiled. A cold, claiming smile that made her stomach twist. "She has papers to prove she is my wife," the storekeeper shouted, too loud, as if repeating the words might make them true. Eleanor stepped back, her chest tight. But then she saw him. Wyatt. He walked into town from the edge of the trees, his long stride steady, his eyes taking in everything with sharp calm. He saw Alistair. He saw the paper. He saw her. And then he walked through the crowd, straight to the tannery, planting himself at the doorway like a stone wall. He didn't raise his gun. He didn't speak. He simply crossed his arms and waited. Not to fight for her. To stand with her. To let her choose. Alistair's confident smirk twitched as he looked at the enormous man blocking the entrance. But he lifted his chin. "Eleanor," he called, "this foolishness ends now. Come home." Home. That word burned. Eleanor's legs trembled, but her fear was no longer in control. Wyatt didn't look back at her. He didn't need to. His presence was its own strength, a reminder of who she had become in Elk Hollow. She walked out of the shadows and stepped onto the porch beside Wyatt, not behind him. Alistair's eyes widened. She lifted her chin. "I walked through a blizzard and did not die," she said, her voice firm and steady. "You do not scare me anymore." The words fell heavy in the silence. Alistair's face twisted. The paper in his hand shook. "You are my wife," he hissed. "The law." "This is not Kansas," she said. "The law is different here, and I am not your property." The people of Elk Hollow were watching now. Silas, widow Jensen, the ranchers, the saloon men, even the blacksmith's family. These were people who understood strength. They knew what they saw. They saw a man trying to claim a woman like she was cattle. They saw a woman refusing. And they saw another man standing beside her, not claiming her, but respecting her. The balance shifted. Alistair felt it. His face reddened with fury and embarrassment. With a violent motion, he crumpled the paper and threw it into the snow. Without another word, he mounted his exhausted horse and rode out of Elk Hollow, a dark speck shrinking into the distance. The street was silent. Then slowly, people began to nod, to her, not to him. A quiet acceptance washed over the town. Silas stepped forward and set a hand on her shoulder in silent respect. But it was Wyatt she turned to. He looked at her with something fierce and proud in his gray eyes, something he had kept hidden until now. His hand lifted, hesitated only a moment, and then wrapped gently around hers. It was the first time he had ever touched her first, and she let him. The weeks that followed were peaceful. The long shadow of Alistair Finch faded. Eleanor poured her heart into her sewing shop behind the mercantile. Her stitches became famous across the valley. People came to her not out of pity, but respect. Widow Jensen even brought aprons to mend and ordered new curtains. A quiet admission that Eleanor truly belonged. Wyatt finished building the cabin on the hill overlooking Elk Hollow. Every evening, the steady rhythm of his hammer echoed across the valley like a heartbeat. Eleanor would close her shop and walk the dirt path through the meadow to meet him. He would be waiting on the porch, sharpening a knife or carving a small wooden animal. She would sit beside him, their shoulders brushing lightly, and they would watch the sun fall behind the mountains in easy silence. It felt like breathing. One evening, the sky glowed gold and purple as the sun began to sink. Wyatt was on the roof, hammering the last shingle in place. Eleanor stood in the yard, watching him with a warmth that filled her from the inside out. He climbed down, covered in sawdust, sweat shining on his brow. He smelled of pine and clean work. He walked toward her, stopping only a few feet away. They looked at each other in the soft light. She stepped closer and laid her head against his chest. He froze, just for a moment. Then his arms wrapped around her with a strength that shook them both. Her whisper was soft. His hold was fierce. "Stay," he said, his voice low and rough with feeling. "You're my breath." Her heart felt full enough to break. He kissed her then, a kiss that tasted of smoke, longing, and the endless patience he carried for her. A kiss that made the whole world fall away. He lifted her, holding her with reverence and hunger all at once, and carried her toward the half-finished cabin. But he didn't take her inside. Instead, he laid his coat on the soft grass beneath the trembling aspens. They lay together under the first stars, hands searching gently, hearts beating close, souls learning each other in slow, careful touches. Two people who had survived storms, inside and out, finally letting themselves be warm. Life settled into something beautiful, something safe, something real. Eleanor became the best seamstress in the valley. Wyatt became the man everyone trusted when something needed fixing. From fences to fading hope, the path between her shop and their cabin grew into a well-worn ribbon of earth. Each evening she walked it. Each evening he waited. And one quiet night, as the leaves turned gold and the air smelled like coming snow, Eleanor whispered to the wind the truth she had earned with every step of her journey. "I am enough, and I am home." Wyatt stepped out of the cabin, came to her, and took her hand. Together they walked inside, closing the door behind them on the life they had built, strong, steady, and theirs. The storms would come again, but they would face them side by side. Because he would never let her go, and she would never walk alone again.